Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back. This is a comp video. It's a comp of my greatest hits, my greatest ranking hits. What I thought I would do, I've made now, I added it up because I'm going to do some more in the near future. I've done 20 ranking videos so far. And again, these are just one man's personal opinion of 20 artists. Actually, several of them are sort of collective videos, like a certain theme, but 20 ranking videos. And what this video is going to showcase all the number ones of these artists. Now, I may change some of them if I was to do these again, but I'm going to stick with this list in a way you could say this is a spoiler for those ranking videos. And if you haven't watched them, please go to my playlist, go to the top, the main page, and there's a playlist, and go to the ranking videos playlist, and you can watch all 20, but this will be a spoiler. If you watch this first, you'll know what the number ones were. Now, I get a lot of suggestions of bands I should do, and there are more that I will do in more thematic videos or rankings. I like to do those every once in a while. But sometimes people will suggest bands that I don't think I'm into as much, or I don't have the knowledge about or the collection of. So those of you who've been really like just salvulating for me to do a Billy Joel ranking or a Phil Collins ranking, ain't gonna happen. That's for someone else. So Google or put the search engine in YouTube and search ranking and the artist of your choice. You can find someone else. A lot of the people that do these sort of videos, my take is my take, and I'm right in this situation. So here we go. And these are not ranked in order of ranking videos. So it's not a ranking of a ranking. It's just showcasing the number ones in no particular order. First is the number one album. I did a ranking video of the top psychedelic LA bands of the 60s. And the number one was a surprise to some because they're not really considered a psychedelic band, but they come from the psychedelic scene. And I think a lot of people missed the word scene, the whole LA scene, the Sunset Strip, psychedelic again. There was a lot going on. You know, the Laurel Village thing was happening a little later. But I went with Buffalo Springfield again, this great band, obviously, with Stephen Stills and Neil Young and Richie Furay and Dewey on drums. And what a great record. Not only does it have Mr. Soul and Bluebird, which I just really love. They're kind of, they're probably close to AM type radio hit things. They did get some airplay, especially Bluebird was a single, but they have Neil Young's ethereal psychedelic masterpieces scored by Jack Nitzsche with Expecting to Fly and Broken Arrow. Just two amazing segmented pieces of music, and I just love those. I kind of wish he would he did that on his first album. In fact, his solo album I mentioned in that video was very much like a Buffalo Springfield record, the way it was put together. But Richie Furay's vocals on this, he doesn't get a lot of notoriety or love usually, but I love this record. So this is the first number one. Next, we go up 400 miles to Northern California, my birthplace, and I did a video on my top psychedelic scene from San Francisco albums. And of course, the number one is an obvious choice, and I went back and forth. I mean, you can definitely go more psychedelic, and with Joe and the Fish's first album, but when it comes down to it, and it really changed things, and it made every record company flock to San Francisco to sign bands, and that, of course, is Jefferson Airplane's 1967 Summer of Love masterpiece. Did come out earlier that year, but Surrealistic Pillow. I mean, this is the record that Grace Slick came into Jefferson Airplane, brought a couple songs from the Great Society. You got the great, not only got her great vocals, Marty Ballin's great vocals and sort of folk rock pieces, psychedeliced up, and Paul Kantner's guitar, and his voice too. He's like maybe the George Harrison of the group vocal-wise. He's really good voice, but not like Marty and Grace. Of course, Yorma and an amazing bass playing of Jack Cassidy. And I would argue they should have stuck with Spencer Dryden on drums. It's such a great record. So Surrealistic Pillow was a number one on that ranking. Another ranking, and in this particular list, it's the only jazz ranking I've done so far of an artist. aside from, did a ranking on who I have the most. I didn't include that here, but Miles Davis. And I included from the second great quintet, my favorite Miles Davis albums. And it changes once in a while, but I think I'm going to definitely go with Thin Silent Way. It mixes a little bit of that fusion. John McLaughlin's on it, is added here as well, and Joseph Zawinul, David Holland. Just love this record. And every time I hear this record, I hear more. It's a moody, wonderful, a little bit of an ethereal piece, but it's got some great sort of soulful jams to it. I just love this record. So this was number one on my Miles Davis ranking. Again, if you want to watch any of these rankings, go to the playlist and you can watch my entire, personal take on these artists and these records. Fleetwood Mac. I had comments on the Fleetwood Mac video. A couple people really just went at me. How dare you not put Rumors as number one? It's the most popular album, one of the biggest selling albums of all time. Well, I'm not basing this on sales. I mean, of course, Rumors is a fantastic album, but I went with Then Play On, which was kind of the last album with Peter Green, and it's got that great bluesy rock fusion. I just love this album. The American edition that added the single Oh Well, parts 1 and 2, I like better. I think that kind of rounds out the album, makes it even more special. Now, there's so many great Fleetwood Mac areas and segments. It's one of the few bands that you can still call Fleetwood Mac with all their personnel changes. And all they had throughout their entire career pretty much was the rhythm section. John McVie on bass and Mick Fleetwood on drums. So Then Play On, fantastic record with three great guitar players in Jeremy Spencer and Danny Kerwin. Love this. Love it to death. I did do an Eric Clapton ranking, and I kind of, tongue-in-cheek called it the Eric Clapton wanking video. But I can separate where the man is now and the music, and a record that I grew up with that to me is just one of the great psychedelic masterpieces of all time. For the Eric Clapton ranking, I put this Cream Disraeli Gears at number one. It's basically a great, great blues album, adding wah-wah and psychedelic flourishes, and great drumming and great bass playing. And again, I think the secret ingredient, not even secret at all, obviously the trio, there's no secret, but Jack Bruce's vocals and his songwriting. As I love Clapton and I love his psychedelic, soothing psychedelicness on this record, I think this is a fabulous record. And I still listen to this frequently to this day. So this was my number one on the Eric Clapton wanking video. I did an Elton John video because I like the 70s Elton John. People tried to steer me into the later stuff, and I've tried, but it doesn't work for me as much fully. There's something organic and beautiful about the Gus Dudgeon productions in his 70s records, about the early records of Paul Buckmaster orchestration, the arrangements, and his band he had, those early years. But, not so much on this, but right after this. But I went with the debut, not the debut, but the self-titled record. This is the first one that most of us Americans heard Elton John, 1970, with Your Song. What a beautiful ballad. And I talk about in that video, my ranking video, how 60 Years On touched me when I was 16 years old. And being now in my 60s, how that song is just... It's just a gorgeous piece of music. And I mean, Border Song, every song on here I think is great. It's a perfect album. Obviously, he had an album before this in the UK, and it was finally reissued, came out in America after this, but this is the one. This is the special one for me. But he made a great friggin' run of records after this. I mean, 5 amazing records in a row at least. Maybe you could say 6 or 7, but what a fantastic record. The American debut self-titled record. So not his first. I know Elton John freaks are going to say I shouldn't even use the word first, but a wonderful record. I did a ranking. Well, these are all rankings I've done on Radiohead. And of course, I got a lot of blowback from people because I picked Kid A when they moved into more of the electronic sounds in the year 2000 when this amazing album came out. I just love this record. I know there are people that just don't get the Radiohead at all, or don't get the post guitar like Creeps and, you know, those first guitar-based albums. But this album to me is a masterpiece in another level, and just separated that. Very influenced by Kraftwerk and others, but Kid A was number one on my Radiohead list. Kate Bush is in all the news now after what, 37 years, I think it is? 27 years, 37 years? 37 years. She has a number one single in the UK, her first top 10 single in America, and that's Running Up That Hill, a song that she wanted to call Deal With God. That was her title, but the record company thought, maybe we shouldn't go that religious, and that, you know, that turns people on or off, or depending your point of view. That album, Hounds of Love, is an amazing album, and that could easily have been my number one choice. But I did pick The Dreaming. This is the one just prior to that, which she basically took control, and it's an out there album. There's a lot of amazing layers of pop and prog and art rock. And I love this cover so much more than Hounds of Love. Now, Hounds of Love, right now, where I am right now, I could put that number one easily. The side two with the suite, of course, Running Up That Hill, and all the amazing songs on that album. But this was my number one Kate Bush. Look at that video. If you're new to Kate Bush, if you only got turned on to Kate Bush with Running Up That Hill, you need to listen to this album because it is amazing. It's, in a way, dare I say it, her Dark Side of the Moon. It's not fair to compare an artist like that, but and you know, we know that David Gilmour really kind of hooked her up with the record company and got her with EMI, got her a deal. So there we go there. XTC, a very favorite band of mine, and I think every record in their catalog is just stunning. And I went with English Settlement. This is from 1982 on Virgin Records. Melt the Guns. I keep saying that. I wish that was a realist thing in the world everywhere right now. But what a great Ball and Chain is on here. Census Working Overtime. The arrangements of that with when the guitars come in and the break is just an amazing single. So, and I love this horse cover. This is really a wonderful record. XTC. English Settlement, it was number one on my XTC ranking. Grateful Dead. Now, in my Grateful Dead ranking, I included just their main records while they were together as a band, while they were live with Jerry Garcia. There were certain albums that came out just right after that particular tour, very soon after they were recorded. And I ended up going with this record at number one, Europe 72, for a lot of reasons. First of all, a lot of people would say their best live album is Live Dead from 1968, 69 there. And those Fillmore shows that have been reissued or issued subsequently in those box sets are just probably the ultimate Grateful Dead live thing. And I like 1970s twin albums, are their best studio albums, Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. Just think they're stunners. And they're like perfect duo together. I went with this because it's amongst my favorite period where I saw the Dead quite a bit in 71, 72 during this, you know, before and after the Europe tour, mostly at Winterland in San Francisco. And this is an album that's augmented by studio overdubs, kind of keeping them more in key vocally and instrumentally. I think, though, that's a great introduction, and it sounds great. One could quibble, one could argue that it's cheating when you do overdubs. So many great live albums at this period of time were fixed. That's a fact, Jack. And so the Grateful Dead did it here in Europe 72, and it's a 3-record set. It's a perfect live set. It's like the last sort of Pigpen contribution before he passed on. But I love this. This was number one on my Grateful Dead video. Of course, I did a Pink Floyd video, and first time I saw Pink Floyd was a few months, 6 months before this album came out, Dark Side of the Moon, and they played the entire suite, the entire album for the most part. We didn't really know, we hadn't heard it. So it didn't connect in the same way. I remember Echoes from Metal is what connected with me when I saw them at Winterland. But I went back and forth. Metal's one of my favorite albums, but when all is said and done, I mean, this is the obvious choice for the number one Pink Floyd album. And, you know, having heard it how many times? Countless times over 40 years, 50 years almost. Geez, 50 years coming up. This is a perfect record. This is a wonderful record. There's nothing else I can say about it, but on that video, this was my number one choice on the Pink Floyd ranking video. Neil Young, I could have done like the top 100 Neil Young records. He seems like he's like the Book of the Month Club or the Record of the Month Club, the Neil Young records, especially now with the archive series and the live things coming out. He seems to be every month you get, if you subscribe to the archive series or his emails, you get an email from him. My number one choice is After the Gold Rush. I think this just is a perfect record. Of course, right after this, he continued with this kind of folky country, rock and roll thing with Harvest that became this huge hit. Then he all of a sudden changed it up and shook it up for a lot of people. And a lot of people like On the Beach and Tonight's the Night and that whole period. Those records, remember, weren't very popular when they initially came out. Not to say they're not great records, and it all depends on when and how and where you were when you came into Neil Young. I did see this tour also, Winterland. It was a great show with, actually, Linda Ronstadt opened up for him at Winterland. She hadn't clicked in big time yet with Heart Like a Wheel. Very soon after that, it happened. But great cover photographs by Joel Bernstein, who was Neil's guitar tech and the archivist for Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. And a great photographer in his own right. But this was my number one in my Neil Young ranking video. Then one of my top three bands. Again, these aren't in order of ranking. They're just the number one videos in my first 20 ranking videos. The Byrds fit the mention. A fantastic record. Now, this and Younger Than Yesterday with So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star kind of have a yin-yang thing, and they almost fit together thematically, musically. But what's great about this is I basically picked it in a lot of ways because of the opening, the dirge, beautiful vocal of Roger McGuinn with Fifth Dimension, but of course opening aside to it, the great originally started writing by Gene Clark with 8 Miles High, influenced by John Coltrane and Eastern sounds and of Ravi Shankar. It's just a fantastic song and a great single, and just it literally soars. It does. I mean, obvious thing, 8 Miles High, soars, Byrds, all connected there. But what a fantastic record, and this was my number one. I love the entire Byrds catalog, and I get when some say Dr. Bird's Mr. Hyde and some of the others I could have chosen, but when it all comes down to it, this great Magic Carpet cover of the Byrds, I love this, and I love the sort of paisley psychedelic-y typeface in that. What a fantastic record. The Who, I said in that video that my number one kept switching. It almost was The Who Sell Out. Now, I got a lot of blowback on that video. How could you not put number one Who's Next? That's an anthemic record. That's a great rock and roll record. That's a powerful record. It's a fantastic record. But I think creatively, you know, not as commercially, but The Who, Sell Out, and Tommy were just very original, and nothing was happening like that. So I, in the end, went with Tommy. It was the first time I saw The Who ever was on the Tommy tour when they played it at the Fillmore West in San Francisco, and I was all in. I mean, from Who's Next, and of course my generation and the songs leading up to that were great, and the subsequent albums, that, you know, there was teases of Tommy thematically and musically. There are a lot of people that love the 70s Who over the 60s Who, but I really like that mod band when they were a mod band in the 60s and late 60s, and I do love the 70s Who, and I think they burn brightly, and Pete Townsend is a genius. And I think the way he put this together is just fantastic. So this was my number one Who album on that ranking. You can see the whole list. Again, check it out, the whole playlist. The Rolling Stones. This is another one. Everyone's got their Stones period. They're Stones fans. They're like from Some Girls to Aftermath. But all said and done, a lot of people like Sticky Fingers. I picked Beggar's Banquet. Let It Bleed was another favorite that everyone liked. I think a lot of people posted their favorite was Let It Bleed. But to me, this is just obviously prior to Let It Be, 1968, a tempestuous year in America and in the world in so many ways. A lot of political stuff and social upheaval and political upheaval and unfortunately assassination and violence. But the opening of Sympathy for the Devil, oh my God, that is a amazing piece of music. And then of course opening side 2 is Street Fighting Man. I mean, talk about, you know, volatile times, and the song that just was with the times. This is it. This is of course the cover as it was put out. There was that version with the toilet that was kind of put on hold, not issued to many years later on reissues and box sets and things. But Rolling Stone, this was my number one Rolling Stone album in that ranking. And then of course there's an album that I think it's an easy pick as number one, and that's Ziggy Stardust and the Spider from Mars, David Bowie. This is an album that just, I remember hearing Starman. That was the first song I heard of David Bowie ever. I didn't hear the stuff leading up to this. I hadn't heard Hunky Dory. And I heard that on the radio in San Francisco. I went and bought tickets to Winterland. I constantly have shared this story, that Winterland, that first show, 500 people bought tickets and showed up that first night, and the place holds 5,000. But it was fantastic. And I've been all in on Bowie his entire career. You know, there's times where I kind of got back a little bit and retreated and then got back into him. But this was really different for the time. And you all know this record. If you don't, I don't know what you're basically been on Mars. They probably have heard it on Mars. So what a fantastic record. My number one David Bowie record in that ranking. The Kinks, Village Green Preservation Society. I waffle between this and Arthur, back-to-back albums. This has the dubious... this actually came out the exact same time the Beatles' White Album came out. Now, I don't know if that should have been an issue. I mean, the White Album, you know, the Beatles suck up all the air in the room when they put out a record. I didn't get this probably till the following year, but this has become it was a cult record for years. It wasn't really a big seller to begin with, but it's considered their masterpiece. I would say, again, Arthur is really wonderful, but song for song, I've said this before on my channel, Waterloo Sunset is probably their best song, not on this record, best song and one of the great singles of the 1960s. But this is the American version of We Are the Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks, 1968, my number one Kinks album. I did a video, and this record was my number one Beatles solo album, All Things Past. 1970, again, a masterpiece, seemingly came out of nowhere, pent up songwriting from George Harrison, and puts this amazing record collaboration with Phil Spector, and Nicky Hopkins is great piano playing's on it, Eric Clapton's on it, just so many wonderful collaborators, and he let that happen. And he just, I mean, it's great hearing the demos that came out last couple of years, and hearing these work in progress, maybe somewhat Phil Spectorized the works, the demos he was working on. I don't have a problem with the Phil Spector production on All Things Must Pass, and I actually feel the original LP still sounds great today. It's got the Dylan song. He does If Not For You, written by Bob Dylan. Another song's a collaboration with Dylan. But I just love this record. John Lennon Plastic Ono Band came in number 2 on that list, so this is a double spoiler for you, but there's a fun me ranking the Beatles solo albums. There you go. Now, Highway 61 could have been my number one Bob Dylan record, but I don't know. I go back and forth. I say that Like a Rolling Stone is probably one of the best songs, one of the best singles of the 1960s. I think along with Good Vibrations and Strawberry Fields for Penny Lane. Of course, there's some Beatles stuff there, but in terms of an iconic record that was so different than anything else, like Rolling Stone. However, this to me is just like a tour de force. It's an easy sort of, to throw that phrase around is so easy when you talk about any artist or, masterpiece creation. Highway 61 might be more the masterpiece, and it's not just because this is a double album. There's so much on it. I Want You, Just Like a Woman, Most Likely You Go Your Way, I'll Go Mine, Rainy Day Woman, Visions of Johanna. I mean, every song on here is really great. Absolutely Sweet Marie, and of course the entire side version of Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. And this was my number one Bob Dylan album. And then I did a ranking of my top box sets. So I just thought it was fun. Now how can you compare different artists and box sets? And it has to do with the design, maybe the mastering in this case, the music, obviously. I mean, the collection of records. And after all is said and done, and I have a plethora of amazing box sets, but just because, and it's not because it's rare now, but I did put, this heavy box set, Beatles mono box, all analog vinyl, came out with 2013, 2014, out of print. Hopefully it'll come back one day. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, it should be available in one way or another, at least individually. But they went back to the tapes. They cut it nice. They did the sleeves like the original UK monos, and it's a beautiful hardback book, and it's just an amazing collection. So this was my number one ranking, and there you go. Mazzy's number one ranked records. But wait. There's a bonus 21st number one ranking. How could I forget my favorite band of all time, the Beatles? I did a ranking video of the Beatles UK albums. Of course, the UK albums are the way they intended them to be. And of course, my number one album, my number one choice of my best favorite album is Revolver from 1966. When this came out in that summer, it was very different than everything else leading up to the following year, Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, and Sgt. Pepper. I'll always love this cover art. It's amongst my favorite Beatle covers, but they had a lot of great covers. I think almost every cover they made was great. This is by Klaus Voormann, the artist and bass player who would play with Manfred Mann and Harrison and Lennon and on some of their albums. But this is the number one album in my Beatles ranking video. So, little thing, it almost left it out, almost forgot it. I had forgot to put it in the ranking playlist. It was in the Beatles playlist, so now it's in both. So now you get a chance to see this and all the other ranking videos. So please go to that playlist. If you like any of these artists, watch those ranking videos. If you have any suggestions, I like suggestions, but I can't do everything because there might be bands that I'm really just not into as much or don't have a good portion of their catalogs. But I'll do more. Maybe there'll be some shorter lists with some bands that maybe don't have an extensive catalog of 10 or more records. We'll see how that goes. Mazzy loves you. Thanks for watching, everybody.